Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Jeremy Smith and Peter Rutzler. This Halloween weekend has been rather frightening for some in Ligue 1, but who fell for all the tricks and who got all the treats? Well, certainly my voice didn't, but all that and more, including your questions after the latest headlines. Paris Saint-Germain maintained their 100% home record in all competitions this season with a comfortable 3-0 win over struggling Nice on Friday evening. An Edinson Cavani brace before a Dante own goal sent the away side into 17th in the table. On Saturday, Monaco continued their recovery with a solid 2-0 away win against Bordeaux. Keita Balde's second in 2 games, along with the first strike of the season from Thomas Lemar, sealed the win for the reigning champions. In the multiplex, Nantes' 8-game unbeaten run came to an end, losing 1-0 to Dijon, with Les Canaries still feeling the effects of a cup upset in midweek to Tours. Elsewhere, Caen returned to winning ways with a 1-0 win over Troyes, thanks to a Ronnie Rodeland strike, while Rennes beat Inform Montpellier by the same scoreline at the Stade de la Mosson. Guingamp were held to a 1-1 draw with Amiens, while Strasbourg had Martin Terrier to thank after allowing Angers to come back from a goal down to lead, only for the French youth international to save a point in an entertaining 2-2 draw. On Sunday, Lyon continued their recent fine form with a 2-0 victory over lowly Metz, with captain Nabil Fekir at the double, while Saint-Etienne withstood a Toulouse barrage, really, to earn a point from Les Violets. And in the weekend's final match, Marseille edged a 1-0 win against their former boss Marcelo Bielsa's Lille team. The hosts had numerous chances to equalise, but struggled to find a way past a stubborn L'OM. And finally, in breaking news today, French manager Didier Deschamps has signed a new contract with the national side until 2020. And that's the news. But remember, to stay up to date with all your French football news, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week in Paris, where PSG dominated a wounded Nice team, even without their Brazilian superstar Neymar. Peter, was this one of the team's most routine wins of the season so far?
Yeah, it became that, didn't it? The early goal certainly helped. It was a good free kick from Di Maria and Cavani. It was a very good header, actually. And that set the tone, really. And Nice were very reflective of their recent form. They're very tepid. They didn't offer very much. And it's a shame, really, because PSG, I think, were there to be challenged. I think without Thiago Motta, we often deride him for the mistakes he has in him, but he is the sort of metronomic plug to the team, if you like. And without him, it's always an interesting test to see how PSG will cope. But yeah, they didn't offer very much. I think they went with a back 5, Nice, and Wesley Sneijder got his first start, so it would have been nice to see what he could have offered in a more creative capacity, but he didn't offer anything going forward or going back. It didn't look like we're going to see a fruitful relationship between him and Balotelli. But yeah, in the end, it was really routine for PSG, and lots of positives to take from the game for them, especially Angel Di Maria. He looked very good. He'll be very disappointed not to start tonight against Anderlecht. Even though there was much talk about Mbappe being potentially dropped, that hasn't materialised. But yeah, it was a very easy game. Cavani scored twice, of course. I'm sure we'll talk about him. It's just a shame that Nice didn't offer very much at all, especially in the first half, to really test them. But the early goal was certainly important to that. I'm very disappointed, really, because although Nice have, underperformed this season, and as we said in the intro, they're the 17th at the moment because of recent form. It would have been nice to see a reaction, especially in the Parc des Princes, to really push PSG. A lot of sides have gone there and done that, but Nice didn't. So, yeah, it was definitely one of the most routine wins for PSG.
Yeah, and Peter makes a good point, Jez, in the story that really came up over the weekend, really, and I know Jonathan Johnson was reporting it as well about Kylian Mbappe. There were reports they might drop him for the Anderlecht game, maybe possibly to save him a little bit, but also supposedly, quote unquote, due to poor form. And I'm just looking at the stats more than anything. It's 10 games in a Paris Saint-Germain shirt, and that's 4 goals and 5 assists. That's not too bad, is it?
I mean, I suppose maybe if you look at those stats, possibly they're more at the front end of those 10 games. But still, I mean, he's kind of not created a rod for his own back, but, it's crazy to expect so much of an 18-year-old. But he just looks such a great player that a tiny drop in form and people start asking questions, which is unfair, but it's, in a way, it's very flattering, I suppose. He still, even on against Nice, he still had a few good runs, a couple of decent chances, as the shot at the end from an angle which sort of hit the side netting. If that had gone in, I think people would still be raving about it now, sort of 4 days later. He deserves maybe a bit of a break, but then others would say, he's been so lucky in his career, or just to, have the ability that he's got and everything, that maybe it's a little bit of karma getting their own back. But overall, I think he's massively in credit, and maybe it would do him good to have, start a match or two on the bench. But, I don't think anyone could possibly take that as sort of a real criticism. Certainly no concerns over long-term form. It's just possibly he's an 18-year-old kid who needs a bit of a rest sometimes.
It's strange to believe that 2 meh performances out of 40, 50 probably so far in his career, and all of a sudden let's bench him. Yeah, let's pull the other one maybe a little bit from my point of view, I think. But the man of the moment, really, Peter, when we mentioned him briefly in your summary, and that's Edinson Cavani. He scored twice. Really nice, well taken header for the first one, and a nice opportunistic one as well, with a great ball over the top, and does well to maintain it. That's it's his 13th goal of the season in 12 games. That's excellent form, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's what we've come to expect from Edinson Cavani. He's come out very well since the penalty spot fiasco all those weeks back. And we were wondering, well, how were PSG going to move forward? Where was Cavani's position in the team? But he's got his head down and he's worked hard. I don't think we've seen anything different to previous Cavani's. I think he's always, apart from, of course, last season we saw what he was like without Ibrahimovic there. It's been good to see him standing up for himself against another big name in Neymar. You just get the impression, though, that there's just I don't know. I do like Cavani, but there is still that side to him. I find that he does have as many chances as he scores, he misses just as many. And I know whenever PSG are on TV, commentators go on about his goal scoring record, whatever, but he's in a side that create a lot, and he could score more. And maybe I'm being hypercritical, but I do feel like he is relatively wasteful. But that said, recent form, he's been very, very good. His goal, the free kick against Marseille, showed another level to him. Not a match winner, but a man to drag them out of a difficult situation. And then against Nice, 2 goals early on, 2 very good goals. So you can't really argue with his form. And he is giving Emery questions, especially if you want to believe that the Neymar stories about him wanting Cavani out and all of that. Whether there's any truth to that, I'm not sure, but he's done very well. And I think what's been very positive to see from a PSG supporters perspective is how well he's come out of the penalty spot fiasco. And he's pushed on and he's scoring goals, and that's what you want from him.
Yeah, looking at his record so far this season, I mean, there's been 2 games so far this season against Lyon and against Montpellier, obviously, where he hasn't scored. In every other single game, every single one, against Bayern Munich, against Anderlecht, against Marseille, scoring goals. There's more often where he's scored a goal and created an assist. He's either scored twice or scored and had an assist, and he's had 1 goal, which is really impressive, really. I know we do bag on him quite often because he does seem to miss the easier chances sometimes, and scores these sometimes much more difficult goals, but he does bag them away, and I think we do maybe do a little bit on him. And we talked, just as this is a belated podcast after we postponed yesterday, that they're literally walking out the tunnel at Anderlecht at this moment, Jez. This should really be another sort of routine win that possibly puts them into the next round now in the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be shocked if it was anything other than a PSG win, against most teams, but they certainly have got a very good record against Anderlecht. Smashed them a couple of years back with Zlatan getting all the goals, and comfortable win away from home. So I wouldn't expect anything other than a win. But in terms of Cavani, I pretty much agree with, I think, everything that Peter said. Even the first goal against Nice, I've watched it so many times, I'm still not actually convinced that it's his goal. I still think it's an own goal. But I think in a way the penalty fiasco has very much worked to his advantage, because I'm not sure he's necessarily a player that thrives on having the adoration of the crowds, but it must be a good feeling to know that most of the crowd seem to have taken your side, especially against a player like Neymar. And he does seem to be thriving off that. And I'm really not a big fan, but I'm more positively disposed towards him since the penalty gate and over the last two matches than I ever have been before. I still think that it's his lot and it's PSG's lot, because of their sort of financial domination over everyone else in Ligue, that they shouldn't be judged in Ligue. They should be judged in the Champions League in the new year. Even scoring against Bayern, that's in a bit of disarray in the group stages. It's obviously it's not a bad thing, but I still think I'm still not convinced Cavani is the absolutely world-class striker that's going to basically win you the Champions League.
I'm going to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Nathan.
No, go ahead.
Because we want to see, when we are assessing someone like Cavani, we want to see him on the European stage. And when you look at the other two, obviously Neymar's done it before. Mbappe last year in his breakout season didn't just do it in Ligue 1, he did it in the Champions League, and that's how he established his reputation. And Cavani's got to do that on the European stage, and I don't think he's done that to date. So it'd be very interesting to see how he fits in. He is the essentially the weak link of the trio, isn't he? So yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I'm going to go slightly against both of you, really, and back the Uruguayan's corner. I think he could be good enough, really, to be a Champions League winner, especially with the talent around him now, and him being the focal point, especially being the man in the centre where he plays the best. I just have a feeling that if they continue the sort of good form they've had in the Champions League, I think they've been excellent so far. They can keep that going if they get a okay draw in this next round, just to sort of level things out a little bit and get into an extra bit of form ready for the tough tie, the real tough ties that can happen in Europe after that. Then they've got half a chance, and I think he's good enough to get the goals, really. He has shown it at times before. He scored the goals against Chelsea. He tends to turn up in the Champions League games. He's certainly not hidden this season, scored against Bayern Munich, like I mentioned earlier. I give him a little bit of a hope. But let's talk about the team they beat on Friday evening. And we mentioned on the show last week that obviously I wasn't a part of, Peter, that Nice are falling fast, but they're in 17th now, which is astonishing. Yes, there's a glut of teams sort of on 9, 10, 11 points, which is why they are so far down the table. But they were awful, weren't they?
Yeah, it was a very disappointing display from Nice. It didn't offer very much going forward, and I think it was interesting to see Schneider, because we were talking about him last week, and Lucien Favre had always said that he needs time to adjust. I think there was talk that they weren't happy with the condition he arrived in. It seems like Schneider and Balotelli isn't ideal. I don't think it was a very good decision to play both of them against PSG when you're going to need a high work rate. Well, Balotelli is not renowned for that. Schneider is getting on a bit, so it was. That said, he's still got time to prove himself. But yeah, they weren't very good at all. I mean, he went with a back five, and it sort of stifled it stifled themselves more than it did PSG. I've been critical of Dante last week. I think again he didn't look great. He looks more off the pace than he has been before. He has been excellent in recent times for Nice, but Last few games, he seems to have fallen off a little bit. It does feel a bit like a malaise rather than anything overly serious. I mean, there's always the mention of Favre when he was at Gladbach, and when it goes wrong, it just falls completely apart. But I don't get that impression just yet. I think the return of Cyprian will be a huge boost for them. He's back in full training, so maybe. Well, I think I mean, it has. You can't deny the fact that it's been 4 losses in a row, 5 if you include Lazio. You're level on points with Strasbourg. It's not a good sign at the moment. So I was disappointed with the lack of enterprise and endeavour against PSG.
It was disappointing, wasn't it, really? But one thing that did really not help factors, really, Jez, and although he's come under a lot of criticism, Johan Cardinal was going to start and then was injured in the warm-up. Walter Benitez comes in. It's a great chance for the young lad, and he concedes within about 2 minutes to a... Should he keep that header out? Is that maybe asking a little bit too much of a young goalkeeper? But it's not the ideal start for a team that's already struggling.
It's not, but I don't know. I didn't really see it as his fault. It was a good run by Cavani, and I'm not sure you usually have the keeper covering the near post like that on a corner or free kick. I can't remember which it was, but I thought generally he had a pretty decent match. I'm not sure he could have done much really with any of the goals, considering he was sort of dropped in like that at the last minute. I didn't think it was too bad a performance. It's just, I don't know what it is, but there's something not right there. I mean, you're not hearing anything about sort of, Favre having lost the dressing room or sort of any arguments going on or anything like that. It just seems that they're in a rut that they're struggling to get out of. I saw a stat that showed the points totals of various teams compared to last year, and it's quite interesting that PSG and even Monaco had more points than they did this time last year. Nice they're 19 points worse off than they were at the same stage last year. It's shocking. I don't think they're in any real danger of relegation or anything like that, but they really should have been looking to push on, or at least sort of try to match last year's run. I don't think, other than PSG or Monaco on paper, I don't think there should be any other teams that they should compare themselves unfavourably to. But I can't see them finishing sort of in European places now, which is it's a bit sad. For Schneider, I think he looks a bit of a busted flush, and he arrived out of shape. I'm not sure he's in any better shape at all now.
No, he's been pretty big disappointment, and there's been a fair few that have been this season. They just look, I don't know, there just seems to be almost a disorganisation around them. There doesn't seem to be a plan. There doesn't seem to be a style. There was a style you associated with Nice last season. They were willing to get forward. They were exciting. They were pacey down the wings. They had options. They just don't seem like anything like that in the moment, and they don't seem like they have that verve in midfield. I don't think any of the midfielders are really playing superbly. I know Seri had a really good start to the season, but he's quietened a little bit. Cogiello as well. They do need that Cyprian spark. If he can come back sooner rather than later, it might just help them lift themselves out, because they are 17th in the table. Is crazy. And like you say, Jez, that stat that's incredible. The difference in points is absolutely astonishing. But
I read it and had to check, because I thought that can't be right, but it is.
It feels like an anomaly, doesn't it? 19 points sounds way too much. It sounds like we're forgetting how good they were at the start of last season. I think more than anything as well, they were sensational. But a team that are coming up big when they need it now are Monaco, who won 2-0 against a slowly sliding Bordeaux. Really, Peter, how big is it that they look like they're getting back on the horse after what has been a pretty frightful October?
It's good for Ligue 1 anyway. It's good to keep them within range of PSG. They're not letting them get away too soon. You're right, it hasn't been the best October. The defeat to Lyon was a kick in the teeth, undone by Fekir. Champions League wise, it's been awful. Tomorrow night is huge when they go to Istanbul. But the last two results have been good. They've been beating a decent Cannes side. They started the season really well, sort of under the radar. We haven't talked about them too much, but they have done well. And Bordeaux, who seem to have, fallen away and joined the list of teams who've had a relatively bad October. I mean, with Nice and Lille when we get onto them. But yeah, no, it's good for the division that they're doing well. And it looks like Jardim's finally finding some kind of consistency. I think the last two results have shown that he sort of reverted back to a 4-2-3-1 and securing games rather than last season. It was all about that 4-4-2, the options going forward and the dynamism in midfield. And he's leaning towards that free. And we'll talk about Tielemans in a bit, but that he's part of it and ensuring that they're solid at the back, solid in midfield, and securing games. The loss of Bakayoko, I think, has been important, and I think he's been looking for a way around that. Because we have, as well as Monaco starting, they have done, and it's quite extraordinary that they've got more points than they did last season. There has been that sense that they're not a finished article, they're not a finished product, they're still adapting, and there's a number of different faces that are coming in to fit into that setup. So it does feel like they're getting there, but Ligue 1 is a very different kettle of fish to the Champions League, which we've seen.
Yeah, and I do worry about them tomorrow, but we'll get onto that in a moment. I do want to talk about the two players that ended up scoring in this game, and they were relatively scrappy goals, really. But I know you have a deep love for Thomas Lemar, especially, and we've mentioned on the show how much he needs to sort of raise himself this season to be that pillar that they lean on, of especially in a creative sense. In the last couple of games, do you feel like he's slowly starting to command this team a little bit more?
I think he is. It's very strange how he sort of had that match against the Netherlands. I think it was the last day of the transfer window, and he'd sort of, the whole day it was all this stuff. Is he going to go to Arsenal? Is he going to go to Liverpool? In the end, he stayed, wasn't distracted by all of that, and had, a man of the match performance for France. And since that match, I know he had a minor injury as well, missed a couple of matches, but he's sort of really gone into his shell, and he does seem a kind of player who, small, unassuming, long eyelashes. He does seem the kind of player who is shy and maybe could be the type to go into a shell like that. But it's strange that you thought, just as he's coming to the world's attention and really ready to kick on, it went the other way. Maybe that was the thing. Maybe he wasn't used to such attention and found it hard to handle. But I think he's possibly that's another reason why he was right to stay at Monaco for another season. I think it's such a good setup there. I think Jardim looks after all their players so well, and yeah, I think it does look like he's sort of coming back to his best. And it was a bit of luck with the shot that it went through Costil's legs, but I mean the way he controlled that long ball and used body swerves to get past a couple of defenders is fantastic. And in full flight, I still think he's one of the I was going to say most beautiful. I think I'm overdoing it with the eyelashes and beautiful. Aesthetically pleasing players to watch in Ligue 1 at the moment.
Yeah, we'll deny any romantic links between yourself and Thomas. Don't worry about that, Jez. So I do want to talk about two of the new signings really this summer as well, who slowly sort of integrated, Peter, and that's Keita Balde, who's grabbed 2 goals in 2 games and debutised ahead of a slightly sore Radamel Falcao at the weekend, and could do tomorrow night as well, as Falcao is not in the squad with a minor injury. And Tielemans, he's starting to get games as well, and he's played a little bit more reserved in this one. It was more Jean Moutinho playing as that sort of centre-attacking mid role that they tried against RB Leipzig. I think was the last time they tried that sort of 4-3-3 formation before. How do you think those two are fitting into this different look that Monaco are going for?
They're adapting well. I think Adam White and Eric Devin wrote a really good article for GFFN and The Guardian on Keita Balde and how he is adapting, and he's he seems to be a key part of Jardim's plans, but it's been a case of where is he going to fit, and he's shown himself to be adaptable. I mean, against Bordeaux, started up top on his own, and scored a really good goal. In his last 4 games, a couple of goals, a couple of assists as well. So he's slowly finding his feet. I think there was a lot of expectation. Of course, there's always the Mbappe comparison. There's also the pressure of leading of his reputation as well, because he was superb for Lazio by all accounts last season. So yeah, he's getting there, and we're starting to see some of the player that we thought he could be. And he, as you said, he's shown himself to be an option with Falcao instead of Falcao, as well as obviously being a wide man who comes inside. But Tielemans, I think he's had a much slower birth into Ligue 1. It's been a case of adapting. You're right. The last time, I think it was in the Champions League, and that game passed him by. He was relatively absent within that. But in a free with Moutinho and Fabinho, it seems that they've sort of found that solidity, and that's what Jardim's been looking for, I think. Losing Bakayoko made a 4-4-2 less usable than it is, and Tielemans hasn't really pushed on. Doesn't offer that sort of dynamism in his sense, and he hasn't shown that creative goal scoring potential that he had at Anderlecht yet. I think yet is an important word to use. Last 2 games he started both. Last 2 games they've won both, and they've kept clean sheets. So I think he's got a good opportunity to kick on now. I think Jardim's finding the right setup for him. And I think with time, we'll see more of him. He can be a lot better than we've seen, I think. But he's at the right place to make that development.
Yeah, I think the shift in formation will really help both him and João Moutinho a bit. I think that playing a little bit deeper in a 3-man midfield sort of suits Tielemans a little bit more. He can sort of spread passes about. He can do little bits and pieces a little better. And also, I think Moutinho then doesn't have to rely on his defensive ability as much, which isn't the best side of his game, is maybe the nice way of putting it. He can be a little bit more free-flowing and creative, and he obviously sets up that second I think he had a hand in both the goals, I think, at the weekend as well, especially the Keita Balde one as well. But he looked much more at home, being not having that shackle to sort of move back and join Fabinho when they were needed. But I do want to talk about the game tomorrow, which is against Besiktas in that horrendous... Well, I absolutely love the Vodafone Arena. I think it's one of the best arenas in world football. But, Jez, there was the story it's almost a month ago now, actually, when RB Leipzig were there. I know he was ill, so it might be a little bit harsh to say, but Timo Werner was wearing earplugs to try and deal with the noise inside that ferocious arena, is maybe the nice way of putting it for the Turkish side. That's one hell of a place to go where you need a result, isn't it?
It is, and I think if they'd won the home match, it might be slightly different. But having lost it, Jardim he's proven himself to be quite pragmatic in the past. I'm not even convinced he's going to go for a win. I guess maybe he'll sort of suggest they sort of start off strongly, and after a while, if a bit like, I can't remember which match it was last season, I think in one of the cups, sort of have a go, and if after a while it doesn't look like we're going anywhere, they'll sort of shut up shop and sort of sleepwalk the rest of it until the weekend. The odds are so stacked against them, and as you said, it's a nightmare place to go at the best of times, let alone when you really need a result. And I do feel that it's a Monaco team that's still extremely talented, and as you both said earlier, that they're arguably in a better position than they should be, considering the sort of overhaul from last year. But it does feel like a team that's still kind of gradually finding its feet. Certain players maybe not too experienced on the European stage, and they are being found out a little. And going to a place like Besiktas, I suppose, long term is the kind of place that's could either make you or break you. And yeah, Werner's reaction was pretty strange and not something you've heard of before, despite the reputation that Turkish grounds have for generating a lot of noise. Possibly after everything I said about Lamar going into his shell, I wouldn't be too surprised if he was rested. But I think Jardim will say, give it a quick go, and if it doesn't look like we're gonna get any kind of win, damage limitation and onto Ligue, even if that's at the expense of the Europa League.
Yeah, it could be one of those things where he might even try and shut up shop for the first 20 minutes, hope that might settle everyone down a little bit, maybe get them a bit frustrated, and do something from there. But I can't think of a thing in world football that could be different between the Stade de Louis II atmosphere and the atmosphere at Vodafone Arena tomorrow night. It's going to be loud, might be the difference between the two. I do want to talk about Bordeaux, though, the team they beat at the weekend, Peter, and they've been sort of sliding in the last couple of weeks. They've drawn a couple of games and lost a couple of big ones as well. They've stopped scoring goals, haven't they?
Yeah, that's one of the main issues really with Bordeaux. It is goals, and it shouldn't really be the case with the attacking potential they've got. I mean, they've scored 3 in their last 5 and none from their last 2. And when you've got players, obviously we can go to Malcolm, but you've got Depreville, you've got Camano, you've got options as well from the bench. You've got Mendy, and they're not chipping in. That's the fundamental issue. They've been very reliant on Malcolm, and a lot has been said about how good he's been, and he has been excellent. And I think he was very good again against Monaco. But when Malcolm's not scoring, and when, say, he's not at the races, and we haven't really seen that, you need the rest of your teammates to step up. That's not really happened for Bordeaux. Depreville, he arrived from Lille, great reputation, has goals in, and we know he's got goals in him. He hasn't scored in 7 yet, and that's an issue, because that's something that will play on his mind, and it's something that they'll want to address as soon as possible. I don't think they're in a crisis or anything like that. It's more of they need a jolt, I think, to get out of this slump. They may have been, I don't know, a bit tipsy from their early season form, but the PSG results certainly knocked them for 6, and the last few results have been underwhelming, and going forward they have been underwhelming too. We can also talk about their defensive problems. I mean, Toulalon has been, we mentioned him before. Is he a centre half? Is he quick enough? He and Levchuk didn't have the best of times against Keita. But yeah, it's up front that's the problem at the moment, and it's something that Gourvenec will want to address as quickly as possible, just to take some of the weight off Malcolm. He is the star man. That's become very clear this season, if it wasn't already before. And you've got to help him out, and it's the teammates got to look at themselves and think, how else can we aid the side?
Yeah, it's a rough patch for them, isn't it? And like, it's 3 goals in the last 4 games, but 2 of those came in that Paris Saint-Germain 6-2 defeat. So you might as well strike them from the record, really, to be fair. Again, Depreville had a couple of good chances again, and he didn't score. And Camano had a really good chance. They weren't completely out of that Monaco game, really. They actually were standing toe for toe, and they've had a couple of unlucky goals, really. But they need to start doing better if they want to chase the European places. But 2 teams that do need to start doing better, really, is that Bielsa derby that finished off the weekend on Sunday, and it was Marseille that came out on top in the end. It wasn't the greatest of games, putting it lightly, really, Jez, but there's a bit of glimmer in the hope in all that misery surrounding Lille, isn't there? They have something there now.
From what I've seen, it's definitely looked like the best performance of the season. I mean, possibly discounting Nantes, which feels like such a long time ago now. I definitely think they were unlucky to lose this match, and Sanson scored very early on, and it was pretty much more or less all Lille from then. Obviously helped by the fact that Evra was in the Marseille team, but Mandanda had a good game. I think people have overdone slightly the raving about him. I think they were all pretty run-of-the-mill saves, and most of them, I think, he dropped into dangerous areas and was just lucky that there weren't any Lille players following up. But that's just a bugbear of mine with Mandanda. But I think that there's sort of reasons to be a bit more hopeful. Possibly an even bigger reason to be hopeful is that they're playing Mets next. In theory, an easy 3 points for them. But it shouldn't be coming to this. That it's still not free flowing. They're still playing Pepe up front, which is still just completely incomprehensible to me. There's definitely still issues. There's practically every day in the papers now there's speculation: is he going to stay? Is he going to go? I think there was something about Campos coming from an emergency trip back from America or something for emergency talks, which is never a good sign. So they really need to turn things around quickly. It's all very well looking better on the pitch, but the bottom line is they still lost the match. And they need to at least consolidate in terms of performance, but more importantly, turn those performances into points.
Yeah, it was a frustrating, really, one in the end. But what must have been really frustrating, Peter, is the simplicity of the Marseille goal. I mean, it's a free kick on the right, and it's put into the only area really where you can do something. There's no one marshalling that area. Sanson wanders into it and scores a goal, and again, it puts Lille on the back foot, even though they did perform pretty well. Other than that, they're playing from behind all the time, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best of starts, and I think a lot of recent speculation of their recent form it can result in things like that. I mean, they are a very young side. You're playing at home. It's a big game against Marseille. You need the points. The manager's under pressure. He's not exactly a quiet voice in the dressing room when he gets them in for team talks, I imagine. So maybe there's a little bit of nerves with that, and it's just a case of lack of communication. It was very, very straightforward. I mean, it's Tovan's looked up. Sanson's got so much space, plays the ball 7 yards out. There's no mistake there. So a little bit of their recent form may have played into that, but it's an inexcusable goal to concede. And like you said, they're then on the back foot, chasing the game. What Bielsa will take from it, though, was a response. And I agree with Jez. I was impressed with what I've seen of Lille in that game. It looked like they were harrying Marseille. They were causing them difficulties. They were creating opportunities, not clear-cut opportunities, which is a problem. They did test Mandanda, as Jez was saying, but these weren't exactly one-on-ones. These weren't opportunities in potent areas where the statos would say have high expected goals from them. So from that side, that's an area to work on. But it was a response that will be something that Bielsa can take. But it does feel like it's a case of almost too little, too late, really. I think fair play to Lopez if he does choose to keep Bielsa, because loyalty like that doesn't exist in the game. So for so long, and he has made such sweeping changes, and there has been so much investment behind him that to sack him, to call the project off, because that's what it would be. It would be to say this project has failed. The project to turn Lille into a footballing force again. It's a big step to take, so I can see why they're taking so long. But they are 19th. They are cut adrift at the bottom. They're not just in by the skin of their teeth a goal difference. They don't look like winning. I mean, Marseille, they did well last week against PSG, but they were not themselves very good at all. I think their first half pass completion rate was 55% or something like that, I read. So that could be down to Lille's pressing, part of it, but it's a difficult situation, and you look at the changes Bielsa's brought in, the casting out of names like Enyema, who apparently is back in the squad, and it seems like it's been too much too quickly, and now when the form's changing, it's too little too late. So there are also some concerning aspects. I've read something about an argument with Malqui, who I think's been excellent. He's been one of the few players who have done it so far, and it seems like apparently there's been a falling out between the manager and him. So those are the kind of signs you don't want to see. Not that it's unusual for El Loco, but it doesn't bode well. And yeah, so it's difficult to see where they go. I can imagine they may keep him for next week. Then he gets a win against Metz and he stays a little longer. But to pull the chain on him and to pull the project off would be a major step. So that's probably why they've delayed it, but it's very close now.
Yeah. Players falling out with Marcelo Bielsa. I've never heard of such a thing. I'm surprised it's taken this long more than anything, I think. Let's talk about their opponents really now, Jez, in Marseille, who were probably just as frustrating, really, even though they won. It was another case of them, again, against one of these smaller sides, you would say, in Ligue, and at least not saying Lille are smaller necessarily. They're obviously just in a very rough patch of form, but they go a goal ahead and they sort of switch off again.
I sort of had a bit of a meltdown and rant a couple of weeks ago about how, I love Ligue 1, I want to defend it, but the fact that this Marseille and this Nantes team are, I think at the time they were both in the top 5 or 6 of Ligue 1 is not a very positive sign for the quality of Ligue 1 at the moment. Possibly I sort of overreacted, but I still feel the same in particular about Nantes and Marseille. I think they're two extremely average sides, and both of whom have been very, very lucky to amass as many points as they have and to be in the positions that they are. I think I think this Marseille side, I was going to say flatters to deceive, but just to be honest, I just think most of the time they simply don't play very well. I realised that form is a factor, but the other day there was Saint-Germain and I can't remember now who the third one was, but 3 like fantastically creative players all warming up on the sideline, and part of me felt any team that has those players and doesn't play them doesn't deserve anything. I realised Germain has been in really bad form since kind of pre-season was great, and then the first couple of I think European matches, and I don't think he scored in Ligue 1 yet. Sanson the other one was Lopez, by the way. Sanson also hasn't been fantastic, but I think he's being sort of mucked around a bit by Garcia, being played in various different positions, mostly ones that he's clearly not comfortable in. And I think the fact that Ocampos is arguably Marseille's player of the season so far this year kind of says it all about the sort of dour way in which they're playing. But at the same time, I suppose you've got to hand it to them that they're sort of making themselves hard to beat. They're getting a decent number of points, and even taking this match, they did what they had to do. They took the chance that was given to them by Lille's awful defending at the start, and even though it was a case of holding on, they did. They another clean sheet and another 3 points. I suppose it's one of those things that if it's the team you support, you might sheepishly say that it's the result that counts, even though you'd rather you were doing it in some style. But whatever any fan says, they'd rather be winning points playing badly than playing beautiful football and coming up short.
Yeah, it's still always the double-edged sword there, isn't it? Do you want to play nice football but lose, or do you want to play bad football but win? It's I know which one I would pick half the time. But Peter, does it still feel like this Marseille side doesn't know what its best 11 is at the moment? I mean, they started a front 3 of Tovan and Ocampos and Mitroglou at the weekend, but the Greek international was pretty poor and taken off just after half-time, and they never really clicked as well, although they were pretty poor all over the field. Again, they just haven't found that formula yet, have they?
No, they do feel a bit disjointed, and like Jez was saying, it feels like there are a number of different players who could be playing. There's a number of different ways of playing. I think with Germain, as we mentioned before, I feel like he's definitely a second striker. He's not a front man on his own. And he's not, you don't bring him in for goals. He's never really been a prolific goal scorer himself. It's what he does for the rest of the team and bringing in different players. I don't know with Marseille. I mean, they've They are trying different things. It doesn't feel like it's working necessarily. Like Mitroglou, as you said, hasn't offered anything yet. I've seen against PSG, he was anonymous. Last night he was anonymous against a really poor defense. So that doesn't bode well. Tovan has been consistent. I have to give him that. But it doesn't. It feels like, I mean, they have gone since they were undressed by Monaco, 6 games unbeaten, I think it is now. So, as Jez was saying, they've made themselves hard to beat. They're grinding out results, and they're very much in the race for the Champions League places. But last couple of games that I've seen of them, they've been pretty shoddy, with the exception of PSG. But PSG, you can treat as an exception to the rule because of what it is. It's Le Classique and everything that was said in the build-up from PSG, which just made it just a bit comical that they expected Marseille to roll over. But against Strasbourg, they were really poor. We talked about this before, Nathan. It was a great game to watch, but they were awful. And I think Strasbourg are 3rd from bottom. They played Lille 2nd from bottom. And both those sides, they've conceded 37 shots against, which is extraordinary. Not something you'd expect from a side chasing Champions League football with ambitions for better. Obviously, there's a number of new names in the squad, and you get all the transition stuff, etc. But it's very difficult to say what their playing style is. You can't really pin down a first 11. You can pick out certain names you can say that are starting and are clearly important. But there are others who just fit in and out. There are others who you feel like they should be playing. When you have, like Jez was saying, Sanson or Maxime Lopez on the bench, and you're not giving them the opportunities, and they're a halfway house, and I feel like the results are hiding the results are hiding what their poorer performances, and their shoddy display shouldn't be masked by what we've seen necessarily. But it's progress, I think, and that's what Marseille fans will take. Progress from the Monaco result, that is. And that's keeping Garcia, I guess.
Even the best need to win ugly is what the Marseille fans will probably take out of it more than anything. Let's move on to our Liga snapshots now, and this is one of my favourite parts of the week where we talk about our favourite moments that you might have missed in Ligue 1 this week. And I'll start with you, Peter. What's your Ligue 1 snapshot?
Okay, so mine's not too exciting this week, but there's a couple of glorious goalkeeping nutmegs. So one for Cyprian Tatarusanu for Nantes. He really feel he should have done better from Julio Tavares' header against Dijon. It's the only goal of the game. They lost that 1-0. And of course, Benoit Costi against Monaco, who gifted Lemar his goal. But to be fair to Lemar, I mean, it was nice to see him cut inside and force the initiative. It's something that I wanted to see more from him. And Jez was talking about his eyelashes earlier, and it's the same kind of thing. You know, he needs to take games by the scruff of the neck, and if we go with the metaphor, he needs to be a bit rougher. So, but yeah, Costi did gift him it. Second goalkeeping nutmeg of importance.
Yeah, I think I'll let you off on this one. I'm usually the harbinger of the fantastic save of the week to really back up goalkeepers. But there were some terrible ones this weekend. People letting them go through their legs. Jez, what about yourself?
Just on that, I would say that Costello and Subasic both came out with fantastic sort of strong arm in the air saves in that match as well. In Costello's defence. My one, I'm going to go the other way and talk about a couple of great goals. Rodelins for Caen, sort of Stuart McCall style chest and volley into the top corner, which I think he's quite a maligned player. I think at Lille he seemed sort of quite ungainly, and at Caen, there were even a couple of matches where the home fans booed him. But actually, I think he's turned into a sort of really reliable striker who probably doesn't get the credit he deserves. So it was nice to sort of see him score a screamer. And then the other one was Toko Ekambi's goal for Angers against Strasbourg, which was sort of a 1-2, a nutmeg, and a really accomplished finish into the far corner, which I just thought it's one of those ones that doesn't look spectacular at first glance, but it was actually a really skillful, well worked goal.
Yeah, it was really excellent. I really like that Carl Toko Ekambi goal. It's a really great goal, and he's had a fantastic season. I'm going to go with a comical one myself, because being the man that doesn't really, I bag on Lucas Ocampos a lot, but I do like giving him a rib now and then. He absolutely, definitely deserves it after the farcical second yellow for Neymar last weekend that I obviously didn't mention on the main show, but I mentioned plenty on the preview show if anyone tuned in that might discussed it. So I'll take a nice ribbing for him here, where in the final moments of the Lille game, Magnon came up for the corner, missed it, and Ocampos is not through. There's a couple of players in front of him. He tries to shoot a goal, and it is one of the worst shots at an open goal you will ever see. It gets absolutely nowhere. It doesn't really. See, you can argue when players go, "Oh, it goes over the bar. That's not terrible." If it goes slightly wide, that's not terrible. That's not too bad. Or if it hits the post, or if it doesn't, even if it doesn't quite have the legs, sometimes if it's straight, it's not. You go, well, it's maybe just a bit of one. But his goes absolutely nowhere. It goes close to the corner flag. It is abysmal. It sort of sums up both what we expect usually from a Campos, at least, and Marseille's indifferent season of having a moment of glory right in front of them, only to miss it wildly. But let's finish very briefly on the breaking news ready from earlier today, and that's Deschamps' new contract. And I also do want to quickly mention that while you're here, especially with Jez, that obviously Metz have a new permanent manager as well in Frederick Hans, who's been named the head coach there. So I'll start with that one with you, Jez. What's your reaction to the news of Hans taking over at Metz?
I'm happy enough with that. I think he's got. I read an article about him today saying, have Metz appointed him with next season in mind, basically saying we're definitely going to get relegated, and he's got a great record in getting teams up because he doesn't have a great record in Ligue 1. And it sort of listed various relative failures within Ligue 1, but completely ignored his whole Bastia career, which was a bit bizarre, because surely that's proof that he is capable of keeping a small, poor team in the top division. I think he's a proven manager who can work well with limited resources. I think probably they are in too bad a position for him to save them, but I think he's going to get them playing tighter, more disciplined football. I think possibly Philippe Hinchberger was simply too nice a guy when it came down to it. I don't think Hans suffers fools gladly at all. So I think he'll make Metz harder and harder to beat, and hopefully they'll react. But yeah, I'm still not confident for them saving themselves. And I think the match against Lille is absolutely massive for both. I mean, we talked earlier about how Bielsa, if he gets a win, then it will take the pressure off for a little bit. If Metz do manage to win that match, then surely Bielsa has to go. I mean, of all the teams to lose to, that would look pretty bad. So I'm pleased with the appointment, but I'm still depressed about the season as a whole.
I don't think anyone will blame you for that, but I think I really like the appointment as well. I remember me and Eric mentioning last season we were pretty disappointed when Montpellier sort of gave Frederick Hans the sack for not much of. They were in a little bit of a bad run, but they weren't playing bad football or anything. And it's not like Der Zakarian was really going to give you the biggest hope, or the interims that were in the in between. But I think he's at least someone that might give them the slightest glimmer of hope if they can maybe do something in January, maybe have something about them a little bit. Let's see what he can hopefully do to the team to bring them out the mire a little bit after 9 defeats in 10 games. I can understand you not being too optimistic, at least anyway, Jez. Let's talk about the France manager as well then. Peter Deschamps is staying till 2020. There was a rumour that, and obviously take this with a grain of salt, there's no confirmation of this, but there is a get out clause for the French FA should they decide to bin him after the World Cup if it doesn't go quite as well as they hope it might do. But what do you think to giving him a new contract?
Well, as I said before we came on air, it's questionable to give someone a contract before the major tournament. That's how I see it. But if there is that get-out clause, then fine. Deschamps is one that really divides opinion. Some people admire him, some people don't. He likes certain players, he likes others. It's for me, some of his decisions that he makes are baffling. But what matters are results. So they've qualified for the World Cup relatively easily. If they go on to, they should really, in my opinion, be challenging for the World Cup title with the squad they have. And if they don't do that, they don't look like a side that's going to compete. If they crash out straight after the group stages or in the quarterfinals, then he should go, because they have such a strong talent pool that you've got to be pushing these players. And if one manager's not up to the job, then someone else should come in. So the only logic I can see is that you give him the contract and it reinforces his position. I imagine that there are a number of big names in the squad, a lot of people who will have felt aggrieved at his previous decisions. And to back him so strongly makes it much harder for players to have a position of power. And we know what players in power in the French national squad means. So that's one way I can see it. It gives him some stability coming into the World Cup. So that's a positive. I don't necessarily agree with it. In fact, I probably don't, unless there is that get-out clause.
Jez, I know you're sometimes a little bit more of a supporter of Deschamps to a degree, at least. What do you think to the new deal?
In terms of Deschamps, I've always been pro. Slightly less so with some of the decisions recently, but overall, definitely a big fan of his. In terms of offering him a contract, I can't decide. I've read sort of arguments either way, whether the benefits of giving a manager an extension before a major tournament and the disadvantages. In this case, I don't think it makes too much difference, clause or not. I think Deschamps is not Dominic. I think he's a decent guy. I think if they have a disappointing tournament, he'd do the right thing and walk anyway. I think that the argument of sort of reinforcing that you've seen so many times that when a manager announces that they're going to leave at the end after a tournament or at the end of a season, they become a lame duck, and players, in my opinion, completely negligently, considering they're paid professionals, seem to stop playing for them. So at least the fact that he's in theory going to be there until 2020, hopefully will sort of reassert his authority. And as Peter said, that's possibly more important in the France squad than in other squads. The bottom line is that for international managers, for the major countries, you shouldn't be judging them on qualification. You should be judging them on the major tournaments. And France have always, practically without fail, struggled to qualify for major tournaments. The only really obvious exception that I can think of is 1992, when they won every single qualifier and then were diabolical in the tournament. Even 2000, where I think France were at their best, I think infinitely better than in 98. They scraped past Andorra in a couple of qualifiers, lost a couple of qualifiers, and I think had to rely on another team drawing in the last qualifying matches just to qualify automatically. So when it comes down to it, I don't think qualification is relevant. As long as the team are ready next June, then I think that's the main thing. And I do think that Deschamps gets sometimes unfair stick. I know that he's got a good pool of players to work with, but I think there's a lot of good players in certain positions and barely any in others. And because a lot of them are so young, I think the nature of things is that there's very little consistency. So, for example, you've got Mbappe and Dembele looking like they can beat the world together one match, and then next international match they're both on strike to get transfers, or certain defenders getting injured, fullbacks, there simply isn't anyone, full stop. You can't legislate for your experienced goalkeeper making a terrible mistake. So I'm not saying that there aren't faults on his side, but I think he gets sometimes really unfair stick in a relatively difficult situation. I know most international managers would love to be in his position, but I don't think it's that easy a job to manage the players that he's got. And while I agree that they're a team that could win the World Cup, I certainly think there's a good 2 or 3 teams that are a lot better than them still at the moment.
I think
whichever players or whichever formation Deschamps puts out.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think the only worry would be is if they do sort of crash and fall if they fell earlier in the quarterfinals. I think you'll probably go. They maybe need someone with a little bit more tactical nous, I think, to get the best out of this team. And who that is, I'm not so certain of who they will find, but they just need that little bit of an edge to them that seems to be missing at the moment. And I'm not saying Deschamps can't make that. He's a title winner in France, so he can't be that bad, can he? So we'll wait and see anyway. But that's all that we have time for this week. My thanks to Jeremy, Peter, and for everyone listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at its usual time and usual place on Monday evening next week. A bientôt and goodbye.